Mergem mai departe și îl invit alături de noi pe scenă pe Adrián Macías. Pare că ne cheamă la fel, se pronunță un pic altfel. Business Development Manager la Drillster. Adrián și-a construit cariera în zona educației corporative, ajutând companii din diferite țări să implementeze soluțiile educaționale inovatoare, să implementeze tehnologia, să le crească rata de adopție. Cu alte cuvinte, să fie prezenți în transferul ăsta digital și a lucrat în zone foarte mari. Volkswagen, Siemens, Mercedes și probabil multe altele. Adrián, the floor is yours.
Thanks, everyone. Oops, very loud. So, before we begin, we're going to talk about behavioral change, which may sound a little bit rocket science, but very simple. Okay, it's a problem we all have. But before we begin, I'd like to start with a couple of appreciation things. First of all, Doru and all the team already told you, amazing event, amazing organization, really professional and wonderful event. I've been talking in a lot of events across Europe, and I can tell you this is one of the best organized events I've ever been. So really, congratulations for that. Second thing, and I think this is actually something that nobody said before, but also congrats to the translation team, especially for me and for all the international.
You steal my moment, but now, okay, do it. It's Camelia and Cristina.
So,
it's okay.
Thanks.
Mulțumim mult, am vrut să fac asta la final, dar vă mulțumim de pe acum. Thank you very much.
Amazing job as well. So, let's begin. My name is Adrián. I'm from a Dutch organization called Trillster, even though I am from Spain. And as I was saying, we're going to talk today about behavioral change and how can training and education help us with that. So, to start with, I'd like to kind of go back, let's say, I don't know, it will depend, but let's say between 10, 15, 20 years when we were at school or at the high school, university. And I'd like you to think, how was that educational system? Probably you had the same experience than me and that everybody else, which is that you were sitting on a classroom, you were having some guy in front of you or lady in front of you telling you things for 8 hours a day. Then you study that course, subject, you go to an exam, you throw everything out in the exam, 2 days later, you forgot everything. What's wrong with that? Obviously, it's the system, but what is more important is that, and I think this is an idea that Enrico mentioned yesterday, we humans don't like change. So we grow up and we go from high school or university and we start working. And what do we do for training? Same thing. Same thing we have been doing for the last 20 years, even though we know it doesn't work. So why it doesn't work? Because that type of, let's say, education only provides a spike when you are end the training. So you are studying that course and you know that, or you feel that you know everything, but then you go to the test or exam or whatever, and you forget most of those things. Now, I'd like you to think for just a couple of seconds. If I ask you to apply today something in your job that is critical, but that you learned, let's say 1 year ago, would you be able to do it? Would you be able to do it without asking anybody or checking documentation, etc.? Probably the answer is no, because we forget. We are human, so we only retain about 10 or 20% after the training. Now, what does it have to do with behavioral change? Well, there is, if you think about it, and let's say, a second layer of complexity when we go from high school or university to the workplace. That layer of complexity, we normally don't think about it, but it's like, first, we all have different backgrounds. When we are at school, we are basically kids, same background, same age, etc., etc. We go into the workplace, everybody is from a different country, everybody has different skills, everybody has different experience. So why do we do the same training for everybody? Makes no sense. But also, and even more important, because of the way training is provided today, there are a lot of things that can't be practiced when you are in training. Maybe you are thinking about very critical things. For instance, if you're a pilot for an airline, you're thinking, well, I cannot practice many of the things that can go wrong on a flight, like the flight just go. But think on some of the situations that may seem not that critical. Think, for instance, that you are working on customer support, and you get every single day 100 of calls from angry clients. How can you practice in the training field all of those, let's say, responses that you have to do to those clients? How can you train what to say when somebody came at you and is shouting at your face, very angry? It can be done. You only learn how to do it, but then you go back and you forget a lot of things. So what this has to do with behavioral change and adaptive learning? Well, as I was saying, I work for a company called Trillster. We are a Dutch organization, and we work with different technologies to solve these particular problems in the workplace today. How we do it is through an application that works with three fundamental components. First is neuroscience. What we do is we take research about how we humans learn. If you think about it, education hasn't changed for decades. So the way we train today our kids and the young people at the university is the same thing that older generations were doing. And we know that's wrong. There is tons of research that says that's wrong. People don't learn that way, but we still do it. Why? Because we are humans and we don't like change, basically. So we use the most recent research on how we learn, and then we support it with artificial intelligence to detect different patterns of behavior on every one of us and put it into an algorithm with big data so that we can identify different things that I'll tell you in a second. How does it work? I'll tell you the 5, say, tips that you can apply, not only with Drillster, with our application, or with our algorithm, but you can apply in many ways. First is learning must be split into very small chunks of information. Once again, we are humans. We can't be seated on a room for 3 hours and pretend that we are getting all that information in our head. It doesn't happen. So the best way to learn is to break all the information into very little chunks that take 5 to 10 minutes. And you can learn in the bus, you can learn going to your office, you can learn when you're stuck in traffic. That makes not only much more engaging for people, but much more effective to learn. Second big thing is assessment-based learning. Now, coming back again to what we do today is there is somebody in front of you, or you have, now with the COVID, everything is webinars and online courses and that type of thing. But you are seated and you are passive, seeing things, gathering all that information in your brain, and then you do some exercises, etc., etc. Assessment-based learning is right the opposite. So what we do is, instead of telling you, hey, Adrián, if a customer goes at you and he's angry and he's telling you this, this, and that, what you should reply is this. What I will do with assessment-based learning is go the opposite way around. And I'll tell you, hey, Adrián, If you get a client and he says he's angry at you because of this reason, what would you do? What is the best that you can do on that situation? And what I want you to do is to think carefully on that, because the more effort you put on that reply, the more your brain opens to new information. That's neuroscience. When we think about something and we think, hey, what I will do on this particular situation, somebody comes at me and says, I'm very angry because of this, and that, what would I say? On that particular moment, your brain opens up the door, says, please tell me what I will do. And that's when you have to answer and we will provide feedback. Maybe you're right, and that's great. Maybe you're wrong. If you're wrong, what we do is give you the best information on how you should proceed. Because once again, on that moment is when your brain is opening the door and gathering all that information about that particular issue. That happens right after you answer and right after you think about that particular question. Now, we are not the same. So everybody has, as I was saying, different skill, different history, let's say. And when we went to a training course in the workplace, we don't go from the same starting point. So another important concept is smart repetition. It's the fourth thing we do. And basically what we do is launch the adequate questions for everybody at the right time. Say, for instance, you have been working, I don't know, in customer support for 10 years, and then you land in a new company. They say, okay, we're going to give you the onboarding training. And you start, and you get the full thing. Another colleague is an intern, goes at the same company, goes in the same position. Does it make sense he has the same training than you? Obviously not. So what we do is, through smart repetition, identify what you know and what you don't know, and we'll launch questions at you that you don't know. These have two implications. First, it's much more fun because you are seeing new things. But second thing, for the company, it saves a lot of time, and time is money, because you're only being trained on things that you don't know. Now, what happens once you finish? Once you finish, you start forgetting, because we are humans. So out of the 100% things that I showed to you, probably 3 weeks later, you're gonna keep 20% of them. So what our algorithm does is, while you are trained, detect the behavior that goes behind the screen. And it will identify when you are forgetting things. And right before you forget anything, they will tell you, hey Adrián, go back and do this very simple case on how to deal with this type of clients, for instance. That happens right before you forget, okay? And only in the, say, particular points that the algorithm detects. What we achieve with this is that you're gonna have that knowledge, all of the knowledge, top of mind always, throughout the year. How does it look like? Well, this is an example, okay? It's a course on the sales of mortgages. And I'm showing you this is the application, how it is, but this can be integrated on any platform, okay? This is for salespeople. So what it's saying is, okay, which approach is more effective if somebody comes at you and says these type of things? My answer was, I show understanding the situation, etc., and I get feedback. If you look at the top, there is a 73%. What that says is that I'm 73% proficient on this topic. And that doesn't mean I have completed 73% of the course. It means that once I have reached this point, I have in my head 73% of the proficient or knowledge that I need in my job. It means that there is about 30% that I'm not able to answer top of mind. I would need to check with my colleague, I would need to check on the books, I would need to check on the documentation, etc., etc. Obviously, what we need is that to be 90-ish. And that takes into consideration the forgetting curve. So as you are forgetting, this is recalculating. And you can see now it's 37. Now, what do we achieve with all of this? And I'm not going to read the slide, but basically what we achieve is that you have in your mind constantly the knowledge that you need to apply in your job year-round. So whenever something happens, something that you cannot predict at your job, and that can be from very critical situations to very uncritical situations, if you want to say it, what you are going to have is the knowledge top of mind. So instinctively, without even asking or thinking or checking, you will know what to do. That is a lot of productivity. That is a lot of time saved in checks. For example, we have a client that they work with, let's say, networks of partners to check chargers, electric chargers. And they have the issue that every time something broke down, the technician had to go 3 or 4 times because they went there and was like, okay, this is happening, but I don't know how to fix it. So I'll be back in the office, I'll check with my colleagues, I'll check the book, and I'll be back. That happens on average 3 to 4 times. Again, that's a lot of money. If you go only once and you know how to solve it, that's much quicker, obviously provides a much more better customer support, but also is much, much, much cheaper for the company. And that's what we do with companies like this. So we work with very, again, critical situations, and saying, for instance, airlines, but also not that critical, like retail change, etc., etc. Okay? So I hope you find it useful. Once again, my name is Adrian. I'll be here, so if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to talk with you. And once again, thanks for all the amazing event you are having. Thanks.
Thank you, Adrian. See you soon on the panel. See you soon at the panel.
Is it again?